In case you haven't heard, there's a big Jewish holiday coming up. And in case I haven't said it enough tonight. Indeed, this upcoming Monday night, we will welcome the new year of 5786 together as a community with song, prayer, and reflection. Just this past week, in this very chapel, I had the honor to join my Bema partner for this evening, Eleanor Talley-Steinberg, alongside talented musicians and friends for our spiritual warm-up of Slichot. Woven into that service are the familiar modes and melodies of the High Holy Days, words that connect the present to the past and, of course, to the future, as we understand that we will indeed return to them each year. And what strikes me and what struck me last week is the power of grammar in our prayers for the season. Whether it is the haunting melodies of Hashivenu or Avinu Malkeinu, or the moments of collective atonement, like both the short and the long viduis or confessions. One need not be a Hebrew scholar, I know we have some here in the congregation this evening, to see that the language of these holidays is predominantly in the first person plural. Chonenu va'anenu, be gracious with us and answer us. Chatanu lefanecha, we have strayed from your ways. Like so much of Jewish prayer, we stand before God not only as individuals, but as a community, understanding that what we seek is not simply atonement, absolution, and healing for ourselves, but for all who are members of this sacred community. If we can find forgiveness and strive to be better in this new year, we hope then perhaps our collective spiritual renewal will radiate out into the world so that it too may be born anew. Our intention is not to hear the words Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, that alphabetical confession of missing the mark and making poor choices, and think to ourselves, well, I didn't do that. Instead, our collective confession encourages us to think beyond ourselves. And as I discussed in my sermon from a few weeks ago, understand that the transgressions of others affects us all. To put a fine point on it, we are all in this together. The traditional sources that shape our High Holy Days seem to agree, for the most part. In Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, our earliest written compilation of oral tradition dating to 200 CE, we read that on Rosh Hashanah, quote, all creatures pass before God like sheep. Now today, many scholars believe that the Hebrew passed down to us for that phrase, like sheep, kivnei maron, was actually kivanumeron, utilizing the Greek word numeron, which meant legion or a collection of troops. With this in mind, the text might read, on Rosh Hashanah, all creatures pass before God like a legion of soldiers. Whether we see ourselves as sheep watched over by a shepherd or soldiers analyzed and reviewed by their commander, the point remains that we are viewed collectively, as our first-person plural prayers point to. And yet, this is not the whole story. Despite the emphasis on the collective, which is true of Jewish prayer at large, the texts that shape our process of reflection and renewal during this season all center upon the specific experience of individuals. On Rosh Hashanah, traditionally we read the stories from Genesis chapters 21 and 22, all of which begin with the birth of Isaac, and specifically these words, Varonai pakad et Sarah, then God took note. God remembered Sarah. amidst a world full of souls, we proclaim a God that notices, that sees, that cares for one woman. And it does not end there. As we continue through chapter 21, we reflect upon the fate of Hagar and Ishmael. Cast out into the wilderness, Hagar cries out to God for protection over her son. And in response, we read in verse 17, Vayishma Elohim et kol hana'ar, God heard the cry of this one single boy. For it was the plea of one mother and the cry of one boy that ushered in and demanded God's compassion. Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac, which will be read in our sanctuary in just 4 days, tells the story of a father and son in a moment of great anguish and uncertainty. Before a God that peers into all of creation, our text centers upon this one moment. And throughout it, there is one refrain that calls out to us again and again, that one word, Hineni, here I am. It is a call we aspire to, each of us in our own way, to recognize those moments where we must respond with, Hineni, here I am. The traditional Haftarah for Rosh Hashanah is the story of Hannah, whom I mentioned earlier, a woman whose heartfelt prayer demanded God's attention. The text reads, I hope you're getting the theme here, Vayizkareha Adonai, then God remembered her and answered her prayer. So we see that for all of this emphasis on the collective, this upcoming holy day of Rosh Hashanah speaks to the power of one voice, one prayer, one plea that can move the greatest forces of the universe. I don't know about you, but I often feel that in our world, one voice is not much against the cacophony of headlines and viral videos. It is hard to not feel powerless or voiceless in this day and age. Yet our tradition calls to us from ages past to proclaim that though we may feel powerless, we believe in a God whose compassion can pierce through the noise around us, that can hear our one prayer, our one plea, our one voice. Now, many here or those joining us virtually may remember that during High Holy Days past, one of the central pieces of music, one of the great crescendos, was the haunting and breathtaking melody of Shema Kolenu, written by Max Helfman. I will not sing it to remind you. I don't think I would be able to do it justice. But those words, Shema Kolenu, hear our voice, calls upon, in fact, demands that God hear our collective voice. And yet, in preparation for that moment, before we arrive at those words, we recall the words of Psalm 27, that piece of ancient poetry that, as I mentioned before, has guided our journey during this past month of Elul. And in it, separate from Achad Sha'alti, which we are all most familiar with, we read, Shema Adonai Koli Ekra. Hear, O God, when I cry aloud. Have mercy on me and answer me. So as we share this final Shabbat, 5785, and come together again in just a few short days, I look forward to seeing all of you with us. I pray that each of us can truly find our voice, that one prayer, that one plea for what we seek in this difficult moment. For without the I of each of us, we cannot ascend to the we that the season demands. So let us make our voices heard. Shabbat Shalom. Wishing you and all you love and all those you love a sweet and healthy new year.